Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Honored to be here today. I'm going to start off with a famous quote. It said, famous person who said, "Who am I and why am I here?" And those who may remember, that was Admiral Stockdale in an election a few years ago, and that kind of went down like a ton of bricks in the election. I hope this is going to be a little bit better. My name's Jeff Kalvarisky. I am a recovering software developer, but certainly not an alpha developer of any size. My partner, Norm Kelson, sitting in the back, has developed most of our company's business systems using alpha. So, we're great fans of it. My real claim to fame, I guess, is it turns out that Richard and Selwyn and I went to the same school back in the Stone Ages in South Africa, but of course they were many years ahead of me. We didn't overlap in those days. And if you believe that, of course, I have some seafront real estate in Arizona you might be interested in. My real focus over the years has been information security. AKA these days, keeping them, the hackers, the bad guys, the insiders, the people who want access to the information that you so jealously guard, keeping the information away from them, the crown jewels. And I've actually was anointed many years ago as Alpha Software Security Evangelist. So I kind of said why I'm here. You may ask why I'm wearing a stupid cap. Well, I live in Atlanta, and the Atlanta Braves stink so badly that I've had the city now rename. The A now stands for Alpha Anyway. So I'm going to be your evangelist, at least in the South. So the title of this talk is, should security be baked in? Where does security go? What is security? And the $64,000 question is, do you bake it in at the beginning? Do you add it on at the end? Do you do it in the middle? And the answer to that question obviously is, yes to all of the above. Essentially, I've been of the view for many years when I was doing development, and now seeing it more and more as new generations of developers like yourselves and the 23-year-old hotshots that are out there coming along, is that security really begins on the whiteboard. It begins at the conceptual design. That's when you start thinking about security, not when you're testing it out, ready to go live. Security continues into prototyping, software development, database design, quality assurance, deployment into production, and maintenance. It's there at all times. I was just talking to somebody at the break, and it sort of struck me that when we don't consider security, it's kind of like bringing up our children, that we give them the best education, we give them clothes, food, and so on, but we never teach them to look both ways when they cross the road. It's something that you should do kind of early on, and it should become an absolute philosophy. and then people have said, well, we're using new generation languages now, C# and C flat and Java and Ruby on Rails and Alpha. We don't really need to. The language or the development environment takes care of that for us. And I say that isn't true. It's got to be thought of very carefully. It doesn't matter whether you're using Alpha or COBOL or any collection of development tools. Security is a concept, not so much a set of technical tools. It's a thought process. It's a way of designing systems so that innately you do look both ways or your users look both ways before you cross the road. And I came across a very interesting comment yesterday, and I thought I wanted to share it with you. A real philosopher who said, programming, which you guys do, development, is a race between software engineers striving to build bigger and better idiot-proof systems, and the universe, which is trying to build bigger and better idiots. And right now, the universe is winning. So, security really fits in with that. Really security begins here, right on that whiteboard. When you're starting to map out the thoughts of how the system's going to work and what the business principles are, or the business problem is that you're trying to solve, that's when you start thinking about security, who the user is going to be, what can go wrong. Just the facts. This is a bit of probably small to see, but it says 78% of the top 100 Android and iOS apps have been hacked. Now, we don't know whether that 78% is right, but it's certainly a high number. And 5% of popular mobile apps have security baked in and use technical tools to defend against hacking attacks, against third-party access. Those are not very good numbers that we see. just preaching to the choir, of course, but why should I care? Why do I really care if I'm just a developer? I'm not running the business that we're developing the system for. Well, of course, the whole alphabet soup of stuff that can go wrong, loss of revenue, unauthorized access to information, loss of intellectual property, of course, it's the worst one for every company, fraud, bad user experience. We've all had that when you go to a website and it's got some, obscene information on it because the hackers got in and changed the user experience. And then, the last one, the thumbs down, is brand damage. And in this case, the brand damage is not only to your customer, to your client, but it's to you as well, right? We really, none of us, either our customers or ourselves, want to be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. We always say the back part of the Wall Street Journal is good because that's when you've been acquired by Google for $1 billion. But the front page is usually not a good place for a software developer or a company to be in general. For those who don't know, but there's certain things that keep the C-suite executives, the CEOs, the CIOs, the CISOs up at night. And the big one that always hits is compliance. They've got a whole alphabet soup of stuff to comply with in companies, regulations, standards, and so forth. We've got PCI DSS, now we've got PA-DSS, the applications. We've got HIPAA, we've got Sarbanes-Oxley, we've got GLBA in the financial industry, and in Europe we've got all the data privacy issues and so on. It's just a whole interlocking and sometimes incomprehensible and impossible to comply with set of criteria. And of course, the one at the bottom there, what really keeps the CXOs up at night is what you might say the men in black, the auditors. We know once a year, either every month, maybe the internal auditors come in. Once a year, the men in black come in with their black suits and their black briefcases, and they're going to beat us up. And historically, they've looked at the finances. Today, the men in black are looking very much at security and controls and data privacy and all those esoteric things. And of course, not to mention the fact that CEOs now are starting to realize that security is, or the lack thereof, is a career-limiting move. And really, you've just got to say 3 words: Target and Home Depot. Home Depot right in my backyard in Atlanta. And the CEO of Target and the CIO both got fired after the embarrassing break-in. They only lost 40 million credit cards. It now turns out Home Depot may have lost 3 or 4 times, or maybe 10 times that number of credit cards. And so, there's the board, and 2 guys are going to get zapped. They really don't want to do that anymore. Again, talking at 10,000 feet or 20,000 feet, not all mobile apps are equal. So, there are apps like you got on the right-hand side, lower security apps, things like alarm clocks, calendars, and so on, that don't connect into anything. But obviously, most of the apps you're developing are location aware, so we've got privacy issues. They're connecting into serious databases with serious private information and corporate information. And they're allowing remote users to get access to and modify sensitive information. And of course, we've always got the issue of, are those remote users in fact the ones that we want? Are they the real users? Are they the ones that should have access to this information? So, just mention kind of the little that I know of, not being, at the level of developers of what I saw yesterday when I was sitting in Jerry's PhD level class. But Alpha Anywhere ways that security is built into the tool. And that's not true of many development tools. And I say facetiously, we're looking at your Microsoft Access. But many of the other tools and your Ruby on Rails and your other development tools, you've got to build the security. There's some aspects in it that prevent you from doing really stupid things like we used to do in C and C++. But security is not fundamental to the tool. It's something that you build. It's an application aspect. Alpha certainly, from what I've seen in the years that I've been the evangelist, has got a significant amount of security of who can get access to the information, what you can do with it, who can change the information, what they're allowed to do with it. That's amazing. But still, at the end of the day, the real security comes from you, the developer, right? Because every application you build is going to be different. And it's getting more complex. The alphabet soup here again, BYOD, bring your own device. Now BYOA, people are bring your own app, right? The newest one, which is COPE, which stands for corporate owned and personally owned device, personally enabled devices that's coming along. Of course, we've got the aspect of a cloud out there, which is a new security issue in its own right. We've got big data analytics. So we've got the data that's being produced every day by your systems and tweets and Word documents and so on that is being analyzed. All the social media are coming in. And the scariest one of all is the phrase, the Internet of Things, or the Internet of Everything that's coming. In fact, I gave a talk on the subject for Bright Talk about 2 weeks ago. And in the morning, while I was preparing for the talk, I saw that somebody was marketing socks with an app, right? With a processor and an app. So the object of that is the socks, for example, if it's an older person, the socks might say that this person hasn't got out of bed yet, and it's 10 o'clock in the morning, so it's going to report it to somebody, maybe the person's ill. Or if you're going running, it's going to keep track of, whether you're pronating and running correctly and so on. So we're already into an era where your socks are going to be reporting on you, let alone the toilet and the fridge and so forth. But that's coming. We have no doubt it's coming. The wearable device is here.
Is that SOX compliant?
That's SOX compliant. Thank you. I never thought of that way. It's SOX, hopefully SOX compliant. So, if we're not doing that today, you're going to be building the apps that are in the SOX tomorrow, right? And so, this issue of security now, which used to be one single big data center that we could protect, is now infinitely fragmented into watches, mobile devices, telephones, and now right down to the level of coffee machines and devices that we use every day. The Internet of Things is coming. In fact, I heard a really good phrase the other day. It said, by the end of this decade, we're certainly going to have autonomous cars that can drive themselves. Google already has done 700,000 miles with their fleet of cars. And the phrase was that the car is becoming a rolling data center. So, if you're not doing it today, tomorrow you're going to be developing apps. And I'm sure Selwyn's already working on ways that he could build this into the car. It's coming. So, the issue then to think about all the time is what can go wrong. And so, really, this is an opportunity to announce what we might call Alpha Anywhere Security University. We're going to produce, together with Alpha, together with technical expertise like Jerry's, and some modest background in security from mine, there's a series of focused seminars online, so it'll be available, accessible to anybody who's in the worldwide development community on security, and try and touch on the aspects of real security, not so much the detailed technical aspects, but the principles, like the CIA principle, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. For those who haven't come across it, what do these things mean, and how do you think secure when you're building that application? The myriad virtues of encryption everywhere, right? So when I see disasters like what happened in my backyard at a big company like Home Depot, I want to cry because I want to put up my hand and say, why wasn't that data encrypted? So if the bad guy stole it, who cares, right? That again is not teaching your kids not to go in the water, until they can swim, or to look both ways when they cross the road. They basically made their bed and now they have to sleep in it. And then one I'd mention is threat modeling. We'll talk a little bit about threat modeling, which some of you may have heard of this phrase. It's a concept actually heavily produced and enhanced on by a little company out in Redmond, Washington called Microsoft, of how you find security vulnerabilities before they bite you, while you're designing the system, while you're testing the system. When you're maintaining it and modifying it 2 years later and things get changed that may undo the security, how you know about those things and get ahead of the game. We're always thinking about vulnerabilities, about things that can go wrong. Just like the military always has to be fighting the next war, not the last war. So we'll talk about that. Just a couple of last slides then. The Ponemon Institute, which is a company that does research, I think very highly of them. They've, in July, produced a new survey. And, we've got these two graphs here. The survey was called Exposing the Cybersecurity Cracks. So they're saying we've got lots of cracks already. This question said, do you provide cybersecurity education to employees? 47% yes, 48% said no. That's kind of scary. Half the kids then are not being taught to look both ways before they cross the road. That's pretty scary. And, that doesn't even allow for the lie factor of the guys who said yes when they're not actually doing it. Oops. And then another finding, and then we're done. You know, how important, they asked them, I thought this was interesting. How important is cyber threat modeling to your organization, to your developers, right? 30% said, 32% said it was essential. They do it with everything. 48% said very important. So there was 80% people who thought it was really useful. And then there was another 20% who didn't think it was important at all. I think that's an encouraging situation. And so we'd like to get to a point quite soon where, with all the expertise in this room, that something like threat modeling becomes part of the development equation. In fact, there's probably an opportunity for somebody to develop a great alpha threat modeling tool. And I'll be happy to work on the design of that. So this is really what we want to get to. We want our apps, you know, locked down with steel. Is it possible? Perfect security is not possible. But high-level security are possible, depending how much you think about it before you go along. So Alpha's highly efficient and excellent marketing team will probably be contacting you in the near future about the series of seminars we're going to be having. And I really look forward to the honor of having you guys online. I'd like to end off just with one other quote that I saw yesterday, and I thought this was interesting. If at first you don't succeed, call it version 1.0. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Do you take any questions?
Do we have time for questions?
Time for,
Sure.
Tim?
Go ahead.
Question left?
I had a slide that said questions, but they said I didn't have enough time. But of course, we got time. Please
Just go ahead.
go ahead.
Go ahead and ask.
Microsoft has recognized that security is a great thing. So with 7, they introduced user account control, which recognized that the two things that are the worst is users running programs and working on the computer, so they made both as hard as possible.
Right.
So where do you see the balance between security on the one hand, and on the other hand, users not constantly groaning because it's so intrusive and cumbersome and just a pain in the rear end?
You know, they say security, there are 3 aspects of security. It can be fast, it can be easy to use, and it can be cheap. Choose any 2. Right? We have incompatible objectives. The more secure you make something, by definition, the harder it is going to be to use. No question about that. And that's why the web has sort of grown up loosey-goosey, because it was easier to do. We started to learn that that's not a great philosophy. That's where you get paid the big bucks, is to figure out, you know, how to make this app really secure, but you don't need to be a PhD or have 17 pieces of technology on you to use it. I'm actually working with a company in California right now, which, if I told you any more details, I'd have to kill you. But they really are working on how to eliminate the whole password thing entirely, and yet take security 2 levels higher, right? Because they say the user and the passwords, which are on the yellow sticky on the back, that's the weakness, right? So so there are opportunities for us as well, as developers, as thinkers, is how do you do security better and make it easier? Yes, sir.
So in your experience, where do you find the threats to be the most common, from within or from without?
Good question.
I function in a major hospital, and you can't get into our system from outside, yet the FBI came in and arrested 4 individuals who worked on the floor, hacking our data. So where do you see it coming?
2 words. Edward Snowden. Insiders always much more dangerous because we don't train them well enough, so they do stupid things, or they have bad intent, like Mr. Snowden or that guy Manning with the Department of State, who took all the emails. Insiders are much more difficult to handle because they have access by definition to data, and you don't always know what they're doing with it. So that's an excellent question. You know, we should not only be thinking about the hackers. We've got to be thinking about security. The hackers are just a component of security. Hackers are a sort of necessary condition, but not a sufficient condition. Security is the big one. And that's what I say often also, last point, I guess, to CIOs or, that they're interested in compliance. We're getting the auditors in, we've got to comply with PCI DSS. I say, relax. Do security right, PCI is kid stuff. Do PCI right, you may still get hacked. And that happened to a company called Heartland Systems somewhere up here, a chain of grocery stores a few years ago. They passed the PCI DSS audit, and 3 weeks later got hacked and lost 30 million credit card. because they focused on the target of the bullseye and not the whole. I mean, the bullseye and not the whole target. So, good question. I think you can't really consider both of them separately. You have to think of security as a holistic thing, and that hopefully then protects you against the insider guys as well as the outsider guys. But that's the big question, I guess.